Firefighters in Canada are battling to contain blazes across the country's regions. There are concerns about poor air quality in major cities. Critics say authorities in that country should have done better in alerting communities about the fires. We're now joined by Trevor Abrahams, working on fire managing director, who is in Canada this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time at this moment. Perhaps we can start with what the situation is looking like at this hour.
Good morning. Yes, unfortunately, the weather has gone a bit hotter and drier again in Alberta. So the fire danger risk is growing again. Right now, as we speak, Alberta's had 616 fires so far this fire season alone, and there are 72 active fires going on. Canada as a whole has had some 2,391 fires. Some 5.1 million hectares have been lost to these fires. So it's quite a serious situation. It's by far the highest level of loss in terms of hectares over the last decade for the entire fire season. So we're only in early June at the moment, but already it's exceeded the total loss for the years in the last decade.
You mentioned the entire fire season. What's the fire season there?
But typically the fire season extends up to about September.
Okay. So
it's really earlier.
So having flown from South Africa to Canada, what were you met with?
Well, this is our fifth deployment, so we sort of know what to expect. We obviously get received, we get an in-brief day, and then we get deployed to particular fires. Right now, our teams are working at 3 fires in the Edison area. That's about 170 kilometers to the west of Edmonton, the capital of Alberta. And we're in 3 complexes there, Deep Creek, Pembina, and the Lodgepole complex. And all of them are reporting new starts because of the temperature going up, the wind going up, and the dryness obviously is in fact going down.
As we speak, I think these are visuals from New York City, which has also been badly impacted in terms of the smoke that is in the air. And we know there's been a couple of reports of people not being able to cope, especially people who are asthmatic, etc., because of the poor air quality as a result of these fires. And so where you are, where your team is based, one, in terms of capacity, is it enough? Number 2, are you able to see your way through? Are you having to use special equipment to pierce through the smoke?
Yes, so the fires are extending from British Columbia in the west right through to Nova Scotia, Halifax, and the fires that have affected the New York and Washington and Philadelphia area are the East Coast fires, and that's created a huge amount of smoke for those areas, so much so that air traffic has been disrupted. We are in the west, and at the fire scene itself, we don't have that level of smoke that's operating, and so our firefighters are able to operate quite easily.
Okay. Perhaps let's ask after yourselves and the team. I mean, we saw some of that South African magic being shared with some firefighters there. There's a video that's doing the rounds of some South African firefighters who have brought some joy and hope in this difficult time for Canada. How are you guys doing? Are you coping?
We're doing very well. As you know, the song and dance is part of our culture, if you like, and particularly our firefighters. They often go out to the fire singing, come back. In fact, the Canadians are always fascinated. You come back after an entire day of work and you're still singing and dancing coming home. But that's the energy our young people have, and we bring it, and of course everybody notices it, and obviously it's been going viral. And we're doing quite well. The performance on the fire line has been quite exceptional because of the energy our guys have. So they've been doing back burns. Those are burns to try and prevent the fire from spreading. And already we're getting very positive reports from the incident command posts at these 3 complexes.
Sure. And then when we speak about the fires themselves, what is it that you have witnessed on the ground? What has been some of the most difficult operations you've been faced with?
Well, the fire normally spreads on the ground, but then it gets into the trees and they have what we call crown fire. So you see an entire tree engulfed in flames, and with that, you have a crown fire spread. In other words, the fire actually spreads from the top of the trees to neighboring trees, and that's quite dramatic to see, those fires. But what we often have to do is we have to secure a boundary. So the first objective to try and protect either property or lives is to secure a boundary so that we can contain a fire within a given area. And these are huge, huge areas, so they prioritize certain areas to hold the line and construct the line so that it doesn't spread any further. And that often involves very tedious work of rooting out the fire, which sometimes goes underground here into the peat. So you have to dig up and put water into those ash pits and extinguish them fully, because if you do not do that, at some point with a bit of wind, the fire can get up again and start spreading. So it's really about trying to contain it first and then moving in onto the center of the area for whatever's burning within the area.
You use the word secure boundary. Would that be the containing of the fire?
Yeah, that's the edge of the fire. So we try and get edges that are protected, so at least 30, 40 meters in is completely extinguished. So that in that way you have a better chance of holding the fire at that particular boundary.
You mentioned that fire season in Canada typically lasts until September. One assumes you're in it for the long haul?
Well, it's a long fire season. Our first deployment is here for 35 days. Our second deployment leaves South Africa on the 14th of June and arrives here on the 15th. So that will be another 200. I know that in the case of Alberta, they have put in a request into the central agency there for another 600. So they are anticipating a very long and arduous season. I can say, just as we came into Alberta, we can see all the staff that have been working are already fully stretched in terms of what happened in May alone. So this is going to be a very, very long fire season for the Albertans and for Canada.
Sure. Mr. Abrahams, are you aware of the fatality rate?
Yes, fortunately, there's been no reported fatalities. There has, however, been a number of villages and communities that have just been abandoned to the fire. In other words, it's so fierce, they've just had to evacuate the people. So they've got very elaborate evacuation protocols here. So in one of the complexes where we are yesterday afternoon, an evacuation for a community was declared. So all people and animals have to be moved out of that area. So that's normally quite well ahead of the actual fire itself. But it's so intense that in some cases, whole communities and villages have to be abandoned to the fire.
Just a side note, Mr. Abrahams, like a moth to a flame, you keep going back to the fire, for lack of a better phrase. What is it about the flame that you go back and want to conquer?
Look, it's a passion, I think, if we ask our firefighters, we employ unemployed young people, we train them up to be professional firefighters. But firefighting is very much of a passion. And, it's a passion, I think, driven by one, doing good to your community, but also being able to challenge an enemy, the fire, when the fire is actually an enemy, and being able to tame it. So I think it taps into some fairly visceral kind of tributes of mankind that, we can actually tame something that is threatening us. And I think for our firefighters, our young people, to be recognized on an international platform is obviously something that really builds their own stature, their sense of being in the country.
Thank you very much for the work that you do, and you be safe. Trevor Abrahams, Working on Fire Managing Director. Thank you, sir, for your time.